Hey everyone, welcome back to Vitality Vibes.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot lately about this whole connection between air pollution and autism spectrum disorder. It feels like everywhere you turn these days, autism rates are just skyrocketing. I was
Yeah.
reading this analysis here in the US, and it said cases have basically tripled among kids and young adults.
Mm.
It's wild. And of course, everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, right? What's causing this? Researchers are looking more and more at environmental factors, things we're exposed to. And air pollution, what's at the top of that list? I know what you're probably thinking, air pollution.
Seriously.
But hear me out, because this is where things get super interesting.
It really is fascinating.
There's this team over at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and they've been doing some really groundbreaking work. They're finding that when pregnant women and little kids are exposed to certain air pollutants, it could actually increase their risk of autism. And get this, they were specifically studying children who already have a genetic predisposition to autism. So these kids might be even more susceptible.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
So before we go any further, let's break down this whole genetic predisposition thing. I think sometimes those scientific terms can get a little confusing.
Absolutely. It's basically like a blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Our genes are like a blueprint that can make someone more likely to develop certain conditions.
Okay, that makes sense.
So studies estimate that up to 80% of autism cases might be linked to genes. It's like if someone in the child's immediate family has autism, there's a greater chance that the child could too.
So it's like they're predisposed to it.
Right. But here's the thing. Even if you have that genetic predisposition, environmental factors like air pollution can come along and increase the risk even more.
So it's like adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. A perfect analogy.
Okay, so we've got this genetic component, and then environmental factors like pollution can amplify the risk.
Got it.
But let's get specific. What exactly are we talking about when we say air pollutants?
Well, the study focused on four main culprits: particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and ozone.
Okay, let's break those down one by one.
Sure, let's start with particulate matter.
Okay, so what is that exactly?
It's basically a bunch of tiny particles, often 30 times smaller than a human hair. Think about stuff like construction sites, power plants, car exhaust. All that stuff releases particulate matter.
And because they're so tiny, they can get into our lungs and stuff, right?
Exactly. And not just our lungs. They're so small they can actually slip into our bloodstream. And from there, well, they could potentially reach the brain.
Wow, so these little particles can actually get into our brains. That's kind of scary.
It is something to be mindful of. And then there are nitrogen oxides.
Okay, what are those?
Specifically nitric oxide. It's a big part of car exhaust. And studies have shown that it can cause inflammation in nerve tissue, especially during those early years when the brain is still developing.
That makes sense. Two down, two to go. What about sulfur dioxide?
Sulfur dioxide is a colorless gas, and it's mostly released from burning fossil fuels and metal smelting. For a long time, people thought it was mainly linked to breathing problems, respiratory issues.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But there's new research suggesting it might actually be connected to brain health, too.
Interesting. Okay, and lastly, we have ozone. What's the deal with that one?
Right. So ozone is actually a good thing when it's way up high in the atmosphere. It helps block those harmful UV rays from the sun. But when it's down here at ground level, it can be pretty bad for us.
Yeah, I've heard about that ground level ozone.
It's formed when sunlight reacts with certain chemicals in the air, and it's not just bad for our lungs. Emerging research is suggesting it could also potentially affect our brains.
Okay, so we've got these four pollutants, all with the potential to affect our brain health, especially in kids. But how do they actually do that? I mean, our brains have those protective barriers, right?
They do. But these pollutants are sneaky. They can actually bypass those barriers and cause inflammation in the brain.
So they're like little ninjas.
Kind of. And when this happens during those critical periods of brain development, like in childhood, it can disrupt those normal processes and potentially increase the risk of things like autism.
Okay, so it's like these pollutants are messing with the brain's wiring while it's still being built.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And for kids who are already genetically predisposed to autism, it's like a double whammy.
Right. It's a complex interplay between our genes and the environment. But here's the good news. While we can't change our genes, we can definitely take steps to minimize our exposure to these pollutants.
Okay, now that's something I want to hear more about. What can we actually do to protect ourselves and our families?
Well, the first step is awareness. The EPA has a website where you can check the air quality in your area. They call it the Air Quality Index, or AQI. It tells you how much pollution is in the air and what the health risks might be.
So we can actually see how polluted the air is.
Exactly. And based on that information, you can make decisions about whether to limit your time outdoors or take other precautions.
So if the AQI is high, it's best to stay inside.
It's not always that simple, but
Oh,
it's definitely a good idea to limit your time outside, especially during peak pollution hours, which are usually in the afternoon and early evening.
okay, that makes sense. So avoid rush hour, basically.
Exactly. And try to steer clear of areas with heavy traffic or industrial activity. Those tend to have higher levels of pollutants.
So basically, be mindful of your surroundings.
Off.
Got it. Are there other things we can do on a daily basis to minimize our exposure?
Definitely. Think about your commute. For example, if you're driving, keep your windows rolled up to prevent those pollutants from getting in. And whenever possible, consider carpooling, taking public transportation, or biking.
Those are all good options.
They are. And it's not just about what we do outside our homes. Indoor air quality is just as important.
Oh, that's right. We spend so much time indoors.
Exactly. So investing in a HEPA filter air purifier can make a big difference. They're designed to remove pollutants from the air.
I've heard about those. Are they expensive?
They can be an investment, but there are a lot of affordable options out there too. And it's also a good idea to ditch those scented candles and incense.
Really? I love scented candles. What's wrong with those?
They can actually release particulate matter into the air. Those tiny particles we were talking about earlier.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So even those little things at home can make a difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts.
This is all really helpful information. But I'm also wondering about the bigger picture. Is there anything we can do to advocate for cleaner air in our communities?
Definitely. This is where collective action comes in. We can all make choices in our daily lives to reduce our carbon footprint, like opting for more sustainable transportation options or supporting businesses that are committed to environmental responsibility.
Right, it's about voting with our dollars.
Exactly. And we can also support policies that promote clean energy and stricter emissions standards.
So it's about individual action and systemic change.
Precisely. It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution. It's not going to be easy, but it's essential for the health and well-being of our planet and its people.
Well said. So to recap, we've explored the link between air pollution and autism. We've delved into the specific pollutants involved, and we've discussed practical ways to reduce our exposure both individually and collectively. But before we go any further, I want to take a moment to really absorb what we've discussed. It's a lot to take in. We've covered some heavy stuff today, but I don't want you to walk away feeling helpless or overwhelmed. What's so powerful about this knowledge is that it gives us the tools to take action and protect ourselves and our loved ones.
I agree. Knowledge is power. It's about being informed and empowered to make positive changes.
And there's still so much more to unpack. When we come back, we'll delve into the research on air pollution and autism, including some specific studies that have been done in this area. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Vitality Vibes. Before the break, we were talking about the link between air pollution and autism and how certain pollutants can actually disrupt brain development, especially in children who might already be genetically predisposed.
Yeah, it's really made me rethink how I see air pollution. It's easy to just think of it as smog or whatever.
But it's so much more than that. It's really a threat to our health in so many ways.
Exactly. And it's not just autism either. I mean, I know that's our focus today, but I've been reading that air pollution has been linked to all sorts of other problems too, like respiratory issues and heart disease and even cognitive decline.
It's true. It's really a silent threat.
Exactly. So we know air pollution is bad news, but I'm curious about the specifics of its link to autism. How strong is that connection really?
Well, there's more and more research coming out all the time, and it's really painting a pretty clear picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one study from Harvard University really caught my eye. They estimated that exposure to particulate matter alone could increase the risk of developing autism by a whopping 64% in early childhood.
64%. Wow. That's a huge increase.
It is. And get this, for babies who are exposed to particulate matter while they're still in the womb, the risk could be around 31% higher.
So even before they're born.
Exactly. It's pretty alarming when you think about it.
It is.
Huh.
But I guess it's important to remember that these are just statistics, right?
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that every child exposed to air pollution will develop autism.
Okay, good. That's reassuring.
But it does highlight a concerning trend. And it really underscores the urgent need for greater awareness and action,
Absolutely. So it's not a guarantee, but it definitely increases the risk. Something to keep in mind for sure.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how many cases of autism could we prevent if we could just clean up our air?
That's a really good question. It's kind of a sobering thought.
It is, but it also gives me hope. because it means we have the power to make a difference.
That's true. So we've talked about the research and the statistics, but are there any real-world examples, places where air pollution is particularly bad and these risks might be even higher?
Unfortunately, yes. There are certain cities in the U.S. that are known for having really high levels of air pollution. Places like Phoenix, San Jose, and Eugene have been popping up in reports lately.
Wow. So if you live in one of those cities or any area with known air pollution issues, I guess it's even more important to take precautions.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and protecting yourself and your loved ones. You can't just assume the air is clean. You have to be informed and take steps to minimize your exposure.
Right. So we've talked about individual action, but what about the bigger picture? Is there anything we can do to advocate for cleaner air in our communities and beyond?
Absolutely. This is where we need systemic change. We need stricter regulations on industries that pollute, we need to invest in clean energy, and we need to make sustainable transportation options more accessible and affordable.
Yeah, it's a big problem. It feels overwhelming sometimes.
I know what you mean, but we can't give up hope. Every little bit helps. Whether it's making changes in our own lives or speaking out about the need for cleaner air, we all have a role to play.
I agree. So to recap, we've explored this concerning link between air pollution and autism. We've talked about the specific pollutants that are involved, and we've discussed practical ways to reduce our exposure both individually and collectively. But before we wrap up, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about empowerment.
Empowerment. I love that.
We've covered a lot of heavy stuff today,
Hmm.
but I don't want anyone listening to feel defeated or overwhelmed. Yes, the research is concerning, but it's also empowering because it gives us knowledge, and knowledge is power.
So true.
We can choose to be proactive in reducing our exposure to pollutants. We can choose to advocate for cleaner air in our communities, and we can choose to support research and initiatives that are working to address this issue.
Then we can choose to believe that change is possible.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's
Yeah.
about being aware, making conscious choices, and working together to create a healthier future for all.
That's a beautiful message. Thank you. We'll be right back after a short break with more insights on this vital topic.
Welcome back to Vitality Vibes. We've been talking about air pollution and autism, and I have to say this has been a really eye-opening conversation for me.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
definitely something we all need to be more aware of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up, I wanted to share some additional resources and tips that I think could be helpful, for folks who want to learn more or take action.
That sounds great.
First off, if you're curious about the air quality in your specific area, you should definitely check out the EPA's website. They have a ton of great information there, including real-time air quality data maps, forecasts. You can even sign up for alerts, so, when pollution levels are high.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to have to do that myself.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
And another great resource is the American Lung Association. They have a wealth of information on air pollution and its effects on our health. Plus, they offer tips on how to protect yourself and your family.
Right. The American Lung Association is a great organization. They do so much good work.
They really do. And of course, if you have any specific concerns about air pollution and how it might be affecting your health or the health of your loved ones, definitely don't hesitate to talk to your doctor. They can give you personalized advice and guidance based on your situation.
Absolutely. It's always best to consult with a healthcare professional if you have any concerns.
Exactly. As we're talking about all this, it really strikes me that there's a sense of urgency here, but also a sense of hope.
I agree. It's definitely a call to action. But it's not a time for despair. We have the power to make a difference.
I love that. We have the power, and we have choices. We can choose to be proactive about reducing our exposure to these pollutants. We can choose to advocate for cleaner air in our communities and beyond. And we can choose to support research and initiatives that are working to solve this problem.
And we can choose to believe that a healthier future is possible. A future where everyone can breathe clean air and thrive.
So well said. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. But it's important to remember that our health is our most valuable asset. And while we can't control everything in our environment, we can certainly take steps to protect ourselves and create a healthier world for everyone.
Absolutely. Every little bit counts.
I couldn't agree more. Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but I want to thank you so much for joining me on this journey. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
The pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening out there, thank you for tuning in to Vitality Vibes. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Let's spread awareness about this important issue and work together to create a world where everyone can breathe clean air and thrive. Until next time, stay healthy, stay informed, and keep those vitality vibes high.